I do think the story of the blue link is far from over. People want to hear from other people, and evolution in some of what they're interested in content that is rich. People want to connect with humans and that human spirit. And I think web content, short form video will continue to flourish. Sometimes people don't seek provenance on the LLMs. They come to Google and they seek the provenance. So we see a lot of people that go ask the question and then they come to Google to double check it. Search Live is coming to India soon. We're going to continue to push both bringing innovations rapidly to India, but also thinking about where does India actually prove a ground for innovating itself.
Our guest today is Elizabeth Reid, Google's global head of search. Elizabeth, or Liz, joined Google in 2003 as the first woman engineer in the company's New York office. She joined a team called Google Local, which has become the foundation of what you see on Google Maps today. Today, of course, Liz is steering how billions of people in the world discover information on its most popular search platform. In this conversation, we talk to Liz about how AI is reshaping search. Is it with search or is it replacing it? We press her a little on whether more and more people are shifting their questions to standalone LLMs, how companies are rethinking SEOs in an AI-first world, how Google is reinventing its search to become more friendly and more conversational while keeping trusted sources upfront. And of course, we ask her how and where India features in the big Google search story. Liz, very warm welcome to the latest episode of Corner Office Conversation.
Thank you so much for having me today.
I've heard you and also Mr. Sundar Pichai repeat the fact that the customer is Google's North Star. Keeping that as a focal point, when did you first realize that AI and search had to marry?
Sure. Well, actually, AI coming into search has been for many years now. If you take the first examples, BERT and MUM were introductions of transformers in there. They were more what I would call behind the scenes. So they were the use of AI more to affect ranking. As the technology proceeded, and starting with MUM, but really more with AI overviews, the role of AI became much more at the feature level. It became much more visible to users. But it's really been an evolution. And that evolution is partly based really on where the tech was. What could you trust? What was fast enough? How was the information high quality enough? And so as we went along, we could bring it further and further. So I don't think there was ever a single moment where it was like, oh, suddenly we needed to do it. We just gained more understanding. We gained more conviction about how to bring them together. And despite all the several last years, I think we're still really at the beginning. I think there's still a huge way to think about how we use AI to reinvent search. And it's really one of the most exciting times in search ever.
Would you say big tech companies like Google are taking a little longer to respond to the innovation than more nimble-footed, startups or slightly smaller companies like, say, a Perplexity? Do you face that problem?
I think in search, one of the things that Sundar will talk about is this idea of bold and responsible. So we want to move quickly, but we also have, multiple billion people who trust us every day. And so figuring out that right balance, I think, is really important. I think also if you go back in time in Google, people sort of think of Google in regards to Google Search, Google Maps, Chrome. We were not the first search engine. We were not the first map application. We were not the first browser. We really want to come in and innovate early, but also do so in a way that produces a really high quality product. And that is really thoughtful to the trust that people place in us. And I think we're really at the beginning of the journey as opposed to at the end, and really excited about what the future is for search.
Let's go a little deeper. I've heard and seen multiple interviews of yours and what you've written saying that the one big thing that has changed now in terms of how people search is that the questions are longer and much more. In fact, I think they are 2 to 3x longer. What else has changed in the way people are approaching Google search?
Yeah, so there's a few different aspects. One, if you think about the 2 to 3x longer, then the question is, why are they 2 to 3x longer? And they're longer because people are giving more context. They're putting multiple constraints. Okay, if they're going to go find a restaurant, they're not just searching for restaurants. They're not just saying kid-friendly restaurants. They're saying, I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. I need to ensure it's family friendly, but I need to be outside. Can you please find me restaurants? Right. So they're expressing more of what they want. They're also just asking more questions, right? There's this sort of idea that many people have that the number of questions you have is sort of fixed and that you're already bringing them all, but that's not actually what we see. What we see is there's sort of an implicit calculation that users have, which is like, is it worth my time? Am I confident that a response is going to come? Is it going to take too much effort? How do I think about that? And so when you lower the bar to actually ask that question and get a good response, people ask more questions. And so they ask longer questions, but they also just pick up the phone and they ask a question they wouldn't have otherwise asked because it just feels like now it's worth their time. They start exploring an idea, or they ask a question and then they ask a follow-up on AI mode because it's just so much easier to do a follow-up. If I had to go repeat my entire context, everything I said before, it wouldn't be worth my time. But if I can just ask a quick follow-up, then I'll go ask it. And so we see people just asking more questions, not just harder questions.
Got it. Is it possible to quantify or give me some sense of what the adaptation of AI mode has been like?
So we're still very much early on in AI mode at this point. So far with India and the US, we're already seeing over 100 million active users per month. Okay. We just started to roll it out in more countries. And I think we'll continue to see it grow. But we also think about AI mode and AI overviews really as two different sides of the coin. And so we have both a lot of people using AI mode, but also a lot of people using AI overviews and exploring how the two of them go together.
Right, right. And are you happy with the 100 million users that you've got in India, say, or the US?
We always seek to try and answer more and more user needs. So we'll continue to do that. But we're only a few months out. If you think about it, we just started rolling out AI mode to the US in May. We started rolling out late June to India. So we've been pretty happy with the reception so far.
So unlike what a lot of people say, the story of the blue link is far from over.
I do think the story of the blue link is far from over. I think it is the case that many, many people want to hear from other people. Okay. And we see this true both with our younger users and older users, right? AI can help make quick questions easier. It can help pull information from different sources together. But whether it's your fashion advice or a high stakes decision you're going to make on a purchase, they often want to hear not just from what the model has to say, but they want to hear from other people. And so what we see is that one of the things people really like about AI overviews is that ability to pull together the AI response and the web links. I do think we see an evolution in some of what they're interested in that they want that depth of experience. They want that personal view. So they're more interested in web content that is rich, that is not sort of like just the shallow basic fact, but brings in the unique perspective or that creator view. But to the extent that like people want to connect with humans and that human spirit and the fact that the world is very diverse, right? One answer isn't the same for everyone. I think there's going to continue to be a huge demand to hear directly from people. I like the value of AI responses, but I also don't like to everyone when they're like, so, I'm going to tell you what so-and-so said. I'm like, I want to hear what so-and-so said directly, right? Don't tell me what so-and-so said. Connect me to that, right? And so to that extent that you don't want to hear the interpretation of someone, but you want to hear from them directly, then I think web content, short form video, user-created content will continue to flourish.
Right. And is that happening now? Do I directly reach forums where I get to hear actual experts speaking instead of the summary, or is that still work in progress?
So as a user, one of the biggest things you would have seen in search over the last few years, and it shows up in AI overviews and AI mode too, but certainly throughout the search product, is that there is more and more content from user-generated sources, right? You see more demand for forum content, you see more demand for short form video. And we respond to your previous point about the customer, the user being our North Star. So as we've seen more demand for that, we've integrated more of that content in. And I think it's an area for continued exploration. We're also been experimenting with things like inline links within AI overviews and AI mode. So say, according to the following site or according to this creator, and then linking directly to that creator so you can hear more. But I do think that's really essential that we continue to highlight the voices of the creators, of the trusted sources, of these folks with deep expertise and experience in spaces.
Right, right. Do you see a gap in knowing the intent of the user? For example, when I go to an LLM, I say, I need to email my boss or I need to email my listeners this. But when I have always done Google searches, the intent is never very clear. I think there is a gap there in synthesis. Do you is Google still trying to sort of fill that gap?
I think on the good side, to the point about 2 to 3x queries that you were mentioning, 2 to 3x longer queries as you were mentioning, we do see people are adapting. But there is definitely room to go. There's a lot of people who've been using Google for years, and they have an expectation about what's possible. And so we're going to continue to experiment in how does the user experience change, not just as a result, so that people know they can ask longer queries. And so people can provide more of the context today in a way that if they tried to do so 2 years ago, it wouldn't have been useful. But they don't do it, right? They don't realize they can do it. And so that is an interesting user challenge to figure out how you can teach people both. If you love expressing this query this way, great. But if you want to share more context, you can. And so we'll continue that. And then also with personalization, right? How do you maintain that statefulness, that personalization, so a user doesn't even always have to express that context?
Liz, one thing that I realized is that a lot of people, when they ask questions to standalone LLMs, they don't seek provenance. I mean, in the sense of where the information came from, etc. I do, of course. But even so, your search quantum of searches or the number of searches you say have really gone up. How has that really happened?
Well, so I would say a couple of things. Sometimes people don't seek provenance on the LLMs. They come to Google and they seek the provenance. So we see a lot of people to go ask the
Right. I
question
do
and then
that
they
too.
come to Google to double check it. So you see that. But I think it really goes back to this idea that we're really in this expansionary moment. Okay, that the number of questions that people ask is not fixed. So there's no sort of zero sum nature here. Okay. Actually, as the tools get more useful, people are just asking many, many more questions. And so it's actually possible that everyone can grow at the same time. Maybe not everyone, but lots of people, including Google, can grow in this time because it's just much easier to ask questions and it's just more rewarding. And, if you can just ask a basic question about restaurants in your town, why bother? But if you can share all of this information about where you're going, then maybe it's worth it. If you feel like to go learn a new subject is very hard, then you're not going to necessarily spend the time. If it feels really easy, then you can take 5 minutes out. Okay. I used AI overviews to learn a bunch about cricket. I still don't know very much about cricket, so don't quiz me on my cricket. But I learned various facts over the time because I had friends and coworkers who were big into cricket, and they would make these statements. I'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so I would just type this question because I didn't want to show up just how dumb my cricket knowledge was. So I just asked this question, I get a response. And so it really just is this moment where the pie is growing in a pretty tremendous way.
But I love how I think AI overviews has seen a 10% increase in usage, uh, uh, and also your clicks have grown. So maybe many of those clicks are coming from other LLMs when they are trying to sort of fact check what they've got. I love that. But but are there features from other LLMs that internally Google would want to match? Be it context. So when I ask a question today on one conversation versus when I ask a question on that same conversation tomorrow, I don't have to give context because the LLM usually knows. Then there's of course inbuilt other apps. If I want to, for example, generate a picture on Midjourney, I can ask ChatGPT to give me a proper prompt. Uh, which of these features do you think that you really want to match, and which ones would you not take because they would sort of maybe dilute Google's brand and the kind of structure that you have?
So I think about this a little bit differently. One is sort of what are the capabilities that LLMs provide, and how do we unlock them for search? And then sort of what is paramount to what makes a search product, right? So things like context and personalization. We talked at I/O and started to roll out some of the features, and we'll continue to roll out more of those. This question about like how do you do follow up questions easily, both like in the session and an on from session to session, right, has been pretty critical to how we think about AI mode. We've talked at I/O and started to roll out in the US and hopefully soon to India more of some of the agentic capabilities, right? So these fundamental things where a capability unlocks either new questions you can ask or the ability to ask the questions more easily. We talked at I/O about the goal of making it possible that you can ask truly anything on search and that you can do so effortlessly, right? So what are the things that you bring in from LLMs that make it effortless? So I think, anytime we feel like it does make it effortless, like then we want to take a look at those underlying capabilities. On the other hand, I think there is a few things that are really essential to how we think about search. We want to do everything we can to maintain that trust and to nurture that trust. Okay. So if we feel like we have to make a trade-off that breaks the trust, then we don't want to do that. A second thing that is essential is we feel like people do come to search often to connect to other voices, to hear from other people. And so we don't view AI as replacing search in the search experience. We view it as augmenting, as enabling us to reinvent search. And so how do we bring those voices forward and allow you to get started on Google, but to make it easy for you to click out to the web, to go deeper throughout. And so that sort of web forward, ecosystem forward part of an AI search experience, as well as trust, are things that we view as something we can't break.
So, no, rookie question here, and I may be asking you to repeat yourself, but when you pull your deep research from multiple sources, uh, so the ranking of those search results, is this the same kind of process that you use on in the blue link format? I mean, just from a trust point of view, obviously.
Yeah. Mostly yes. Okay. So what we do with something like deep search is we are querying web search underlying ranking, and so in that sense, it's the same. It's different in the sense that the a question a user is asking with deep research is often more complex than any single web search will go, and so we'll take that search query and we'll break it into several queries. Right. Okay. But once you issue those queries, we're basically hitting our underlying core web ranking the same way we would if you had sort of gotten the traditional blue links. And so we are really building on top of that long tradition and expertise and trust in web ranking, but doing it to answer questions that are not possible as a single query. I still think we'll continue to innovate in that space. How do you get better at doing the query fan out? How do we get better at the model understanding how to take advantage of those different links to give the most high quality response and pull it together? But it is really built on the same underlying web ranking.
Okay. Let me flip this a little bit and talk about companies that feature on those blue links, okay, or entities that feature. How is discoverability changing? How is the SEO playbook changing in the era of, AI search and AI overview and AI mode?
So I think there's a couple of different things for companies to think about. In some sense, the guidance is very much the same, and in some ways, it's different. So the guidance that we've given that we would continue is people should really produce content that users care about and not think about building content for search engines. Okay. But that only becomes more pronounced now. Okay. If you produce content that's very shallow, that you're just going to hope is ranking at the top, but doesn't really have much to say, then your content really doesn't have much more than like an AI overview would give in the first place. Okay. So people aren't going to
Sure.
want to click to go check the same fact that comes. Okay. But if you produce really high quality content, you bring your perspective in, you're bringing your experience, you're doing something that you want to read for a minute or something. Okay. Then users are going to want to click in further. Okay. Because they're not clicking on the link to get that 5-second response. They're clicking on the link to go deeper. Okay. So there's more push on sort of niche content, more push on sort of the detailed understanding of the space that you're coming in across. So less manufacturing of content and more like actually putting yourself in the space. The other thing I would say is we would encourage publishers and creators to think about it in a different way, in that there's what we see in some of the traffic is that there's less of what we call bounce clicks, okay, where a user clicks and they immediately click back, right? They're like, oh, I thought this was going to be useful. No, it's not. Okay. And because we're giving enough context, people kind of know and they don't have to do as many of those bounce clicks. Okay. So what you do see is a lot of excitement on the deep clicks. Okay. And so I think that, like, as a publisher, you want to really think about, like, what is the user's experience when they get to my site? Okay. And so sort of be optimizing for a great experience when you land on that page. Because people are going to want to go there, not to just get that 5-second thing, but to actually go deeper on that. And so in some sense, that's always the content we wanted people to create. And it's always the content that users really wanted to see. But you kind of can't get away with content in the old way. Now you really do have to build that content for users.
So, in a recent interview, Mr. Sundar Pichai said that the ad revenue from AI overview search results is the same as without. Now, I may be getting into a little complicated territory here, but in the simplest possible way, a lot of our viewers would want to understand how is that possible.
So I think there's multiple different dynamics going on. On the one hand, sometimes when AI overviews show up, the ads are lower on the page. On the other hand, the search traffic is just growing overall, right? So we see with AI overviews, people issue more queries. And so at the highest level, the two roughly balance out.
Okay, let's come to agentic AI. So as a big tech company, you can't chase every innovation that you see that others are also chasing, right? And agentic AI is still, in its somewhat nascent stages. And I'm again talking about this as a user. Project Mariner is, of course, still a prototype. But do you see the human agent interactions really evolving to where people are saying they would evolve? And you mentioned India also in this context, so I would like you to double click on that as well.
Sure. So I think the word agentic means a lot of things to different people as they come. I think the way that we think about it in search is, if you go back to this idea that you can ask for anything effortlessly, where is there grunt work? Where is there a bunch of work that a user just doesn't want to spend time? It's too much effort. And how do we take that work out of it? Okay. And in some sense, things like AI mode took out of the grunt work of sometimes having to issue many, many queries and pulling the information together by doing it. Okay. But then you can think about it at the next level, whether it's from a productivity perspective or maybe dealing with transactions. How can you actually reduce that? Now, there's an interesting part to your point, which is the tech is nascent and also user expectations are changing and early on. And so we have to figure out how we both take out the grunt work, but don't eliminate control where a user wants it. Okay. So maybe we can do, in some cases, if a transaction is really important, maybe we can do a lot of the work to get to the point where, like, most of the initial form filling is there, but you maybe still want to click yes on the transaction rather than have us do the final transaction for you. Right. Okay. On the other hand, maybe something is repeat and you're just like, I just want to do this again and again. Fine. Okay. One of the things we did in search over time is help automate a bunch of the phone calls. Okay. So we've been expanding the ability, like if you're trying to get a haircut or you're trying to get a plumber or something, where actually in a bunch of cases, it's not even just about the browser doing that. Like, you actually, at least in the US, you actually have to pick up the phone and call a whole bunch of plumbers to get out basic information and then go figure out, okay, can we eliminate the work around that? And so we've done work on that. And so we think about that also from a tech perspective, as there's not a single solution. Maybe we have to automate some of your phone calls. Maybe we have to automate some of your browser actions. Maybe there's times where we integrate on the API side, and we should pull them all together so that the experience feels fast. It feels like it's empowering to you. It feels like it's good for the ecosystem as well, right? So we don't want to disintermediate the partners that we're working with. There's different aspects that may matter to them. Do they still have a loyalty and relationship with their customer? Do they still have the ability to upsell? And so when we want to think about agentic experiences, we really want to work with them so that the user experience feels as easy as possible. The user feels empowered, but the partner also feels great about that as we go. And I think it's something that will change every 6 months. And it'll be easier in some industries than others. The stakes are higher in some cases than others. and we'll continue that. To my point about India earlier, India is like really such an important market for search. It's one of our top markets overall. It's our biggest market for lens, our biggest market for voice. It's a market that like we brought AI mode to India right after the US before any other country, and within basically a month of rolling it out at scale in the US. Um,
Mm.
so it's such a critical market for us to innovate on. And so, if I looked a few years ago, if we launched something in the US, like, I don't know, maybe a year or 18 months later it would come. Now we're really trying to shrink it down. Um, 2 months, if not weeks. Search Live is coming to India soon. I'm delighted to share. So we're going to continue to push on both bringing innovations rapidly to India, but also thinking about where does India actually prove a ground for innovating itself. Like it's not always going to be second. Oftentimes it will be second and not third, fourth, or fifth. But sometimes I think it'll even be first going forward. India is really rapid at adapting a bunch of the AI innovations. And, when you see the uptake with things like Lens and Voice, it really feels like it's pushing the limit. The users are really challenging the systems. And so we really need to respond and innovate in them.
Great. In terms of tech talent, how is India contributing to Google's shift from information to intelligence?
We have a great team in search here. And it actually cuts across our whole system. So from the underlying infrastructure that makes it possible to serve at low latency and high capacity, to what is our work on innovating in the actual core intelligence and the quality of the system, all the way up through some of our different vertical experiences like sports or local and travel. We have quite a meaningful presence in search. I also know that beyond just search, we work closely with Google DeepMind, which also has a presence in India here. And I would say the India team here is both great at helping us do things like localizing for the market and really understand what it is, but they aren't just doing India-specific work. They're really building both foundational work and working to figure out how it excels in the country.
Right. Speaking of localizing, in fact, in a recent podcast, one of the things you mentioned as the huge potential of AI is how it's revolutionizing the use of language. And in fact, you specifically mentioned Hindi. Now, in India, the landscape is that a lot of local AI first companies are trying various things in terms of vernacular LLMs and how to use AI or how to use local languages in terms of AI, but they have seen very limited success. Would Google, with its huge, treasure of data and its capabilities, do something on that front in India?
I think this is an area we're going to continue to invest in quite deeply. We've sort of had state-of-the-art models on language understanding and been investing in them for over a decade now. We brought not just Hindi rapidly to AI mode and AI overviews, but actually launched one of our first cross-language experiences with AI overviews, toggling between Hindi and English last year as they come. And we rolled out AI overviews in languages beyond Hindi and look to do the same with AI mode. I think one of the things that's really exciting about what LLMs can do is that not all the content is available in all the languages, right? Certain content is available in one language, but not in the other. And historically, if the content didn't exist on the web in your language, it was kind of locked out from those users, right? And LLMs are allowing us to sort of take the learnings from one language and output them in a way that's understandable for the users. I think there's still a lot of innovation to go. To your point about how do you get vernacular right? How do you really understand cultural topics in the question? How do you mix, if we talk about Hindi, but it's really in many cases not just Hindi or English, but Hinglish in there. How do you adapt to that question?
Yeah.
How do you actually make it such that you really feel like language is not a barrier, right? I feel like everyone, we made this comment, or Larry and Sergey set this vision of make information universally accessible, okay? But it hasn't really been universally accessible in many ways with language. But it's also not just not just across languages, but also even within a language. What's your level of literacy on something. Okay. I may consider myself to have fairly good tech literacy. I have okay financial literacy. I have pretty poor medical literacy, right? Like, you give me a medical paper and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to spend 5 hours. Okay. But if I can learn about a topic that matters to my daughter, that's really powerful to me across. And so I think both cross language and within a language and across voice versus written. We also see this with visual understanding, right? I don't know what it is. I come to India, I see a sign in Hindi. I have no idea what it says. If you ask me to type it in, like, I'd have no idea how to even transcribe. Okay, but I can use Lens and I can translate it in the one. And so I think there's a lot of exciting work ahead that really just unlocks intelligence for everyone, right? It's not enough for access to information if you don't understand it. And now we'll be able to help people understand it.
Finally, Liz, I'll refer to another podcast, and this is a few years back. And you told the host, if I were to take Google away today, you would go nuts. Do you still think that's true?
I think for most people, absolutely. I think a lot of people, like what we see from our data is that people are still using Google, and even as sometimes they're adapting new tools, they continue to use Google, and that's because it really is much more overall an expansionary moment. There's a tendency for us to forget sometimes about what you use search for. Like, you use search to navigate to URLs. For all the advancements with LLMs, people are still clicking to their favorite sites, right? You use it to go and browse. You use it to go look up your favorite Bollywood actor. And you don't even know what to ask. You just want to know what's going on, and we'll bring a visual SERP. All that said, it's a space that we are going to continue to innovate, right? We always want to figure out what is the next frontier for being the most helpful information, to actually providing it in a way that feels easy as possible. And so we're going to be relentless at that. But I really believe that we will continue to have search be as important for people over the next decade as it was for the last couple.
Liz, thank you so much for joining us on Corner Office Conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. A pleasure. And I hope to chat with you again sometime soon.
Absolutely. That's it for today. We hope you liked this exclusive interview. It was produced by me, Vinay Joshi, and Rajas Naik, sound designed by Amrit Reddy. Please subscribe to Corner Office Conversation, where we talk to the most interesting business leaders from India and the world. A new episode drops every alternate Monday, wherever you get your podcasts. Keep listening. Have a good week.